Hello students and welcome to today's lesson, A Wrong Man in Workers' Paradise, a short story by Rabindranath Tagore. This lesson is taken from Unit 1, Semester 3. The lesson is presented by Dr. P.V. Geeta Lakshmi Patnaik, Associate Professor of English, BJR Government Degree College, Narayanguda, Hyderabad. Before we begin, let us take a quick look at a few pictures that I have for you. What do you think of these pictures? What is this picture about? And what is this about? And now take a look at these two pictures. How would you describe them? I'll give you 2 minutes. Or rather, 1 minute would be more than enough. How would you, can you give me a word which will describe all the 4 pictures put together? Take a look at it again. What is this and how is this picture different from this? And what is this picture trying to convey? What is this picture doing here? Take a look at them. Is there any word which describes all 4 of them put together? Please think, students. Yeah. Anybody with the answer? Yeah. What do you think this is about? Like, what is this? How would you describe it? And how would you describe this picture, this one, and this? So here are a few quick questions. What do you think of the pictures? You can just note down your answers in your notebooks. Moving on to the next question. Is there a word that would describe them as a group? Choose the correct alternative. A, sports. B, fine arts. C, subjects. Which one do you think is the right answer? Which word would describe them, all these 4 pictures, as a group? Is it A, sports? Is it B, fine arts? Or is it C, subjects? Yeah, you're right. It is B, fine arts. So going back to these pictures, what kind of a fine art would this be? Yes, you're right. This is a painting. And this is a sculpture. Actually a statue, but then, yes. Sculptures, statues, all of these are also art forms. And the picture on the left is, it signifies music, and this picture signifies dance. So all 4 of them put together can come under the word or the term fine arts. Are we clear on this, students? Yeah. Now, what are fine arts? And what is the value or usefulness of art? So fine arts, as we can see, any kind of creative art, especially visual art, whose products are to be appreciated primarily or solely for their imaginative, aesthetic, or intellectual content. So let us read this once again. Fine arts are any kind of creative art, especially visual art, whose products are to be appreciated primarily or solely for their imaginative, aesthetic, or intellectual content. Moving on to the next question, what is the value or usefulness of art? True art needs no justification. It need not serve any political, didactic, moral, or practical purpose. Art is valuable as art, and the only objective of art is the pursuit of pure beauty. This is the message that we get from the present story, which is A Wrong Man in Workers' Paradise. So when we look at this story, Um, and the story is A Wrong Man in Workers' Paradise. The idea, the central idea in the story is that, this is the idea that true art needs no justification, and art is valuable as art, and the only objective of art is the pursuit of pure beauty. So this is what we are going to find in the story. Now let us just take a quick look at Rabindranath Tagore, the writer of this short story. Rabindranath Tagore was a poet, novelist, playwright, painter, and music composer. He was also a philosopher and a visionary educationist. He established Shantiniketan, and it is one of its kind in the whole world. He was the first Asian to receive the Nobel Prize in 1913 for his work Gitanjali, which is a collection of poems. His other famous works are Gora, Ghare Bhare, etc. It's very significant that two nations chose his compositions as national anthems. And these two countries are India and Bangladesh. India's Janagana Mana and Bangladesh's Amar Shonar Bangla are the national anthems which were based on his compositions. Let us take a quick look at what the story is all about. A Wrong Man in Workers' Paradise by Rabindranath Tagore is about a young artist who dies and is sent to workers' paradise by mistake. It narrates what happens when he interacts with the people there. Through the simple and humorous narrative, Tagore conveys the message that human beings need to have some kind of recreation, and also that art need not have a moral or utilitarian purpose. The pursuit of pure beauty can be its sole objective. So art can be created. Any creative art is there only because it tries to attain pure beauty, or it tries to create pure beauty. It's not as though it needs to have some kind of a moral or a utilitarian purpose. And this is what Tagore conveys through this story. We now have a few difficult words. We have a glossary in which some of the words which are a little difficult to understand are explained here. Aerial means moving through the air. Exult means filled with joy. Gasp means to struggle for breath or pant. And hustle means to move quickly. Jostle means to bump into or push. Linger means to remain or stay. Moving finger is a reference to fate or destiny. Peer means to look closely. Pitcher is a large pot or jug. The other words are ply, which means to work busily. Pry, which means to look closely or curiously. Quaint, which means being attractive because it is old-fashioned. Scan is to look carefully at something. Summon means to send for. Torrent is a stream. Trip means to hop or dance with light steps. Whim is an unusual desire or an impulse. Wisp is a curl of hair. These are some of the words which are a little difficult to understand, and that's why the meanings are provided here. Students, you can read it again. Aerial means moving through the air. Exult is filled with joy. Gasp is struggle for breath or pant. Hustle is to move quickly. Jostle is to bump into or push. Linger means to remain or stay. Moving finger is fate or destiny. Peer means to look closely. Picture is a large pot or jug. Ply means to work busily. Pry, to look closely or curiously. Quaint is attractive because it is old-fashioned. Scan, to look closely at something. Summon, to send for. Torrent is a stream. Trip means to hop or dance with light steps. Whim is an unusual desire or impulse. And wisp is a curl of hair. Moving on to the setting of the story. Initially, the story is set somewhere in a place on earth. Yes, of course, in India. And a young man or an artist is shown to be spending his entire life painting and making sculptures and many other such things. And then, after his death, he is sent, of course, by mistake, to workers' paradise, which is a heaven meant for busy and diligent people. And then the story is all about what happens there. And eventually, by the end of the story, he is made to leave the place, and as he is a disruptive influence. So, as we can see, in the first part of the story, um, the first part of the story is set on Earth, and then the major part of the story, a very, very large part of the story, is set in workers' paradise, which is a kind of a heaven. And at the end, he's made to leave the story, and so there is a movement away from workers' paradise. Though it's not, we're not sure where he goes at the end. Maybe he goes to another place where it's a paradise for artists, or maybe a paradise for idle people. We don't know that. But then at the end, he leaves the place. Therefore, for the major part of the story, the setting is workers' paradise, which is a heaven meant for busy and diligent people. Now, students, I want you to take a look at this diagram that we have here. This is generally the way a short story is structured. A short story or a novel is structured in this way, but especially if it's a short story, then it follows this pattern, which is called the plot, the structure of the plot. So I want you to look at this diagram very carefully. In the beginning, like this is the first part of the diagram, this is exposition, and then you have a rising action, then there is the climax here, then there is a falling action and the resolution. So let us do it again. The exposition, the rising action which goes to the climax, and then the falling action and the resolution. So here, exposition means the beginning of the story where characters and setting are introduced. This is a very important part because this is where the story actually begins. And at the beginning itself, the writer has to establish the setting and the characters, tell us something about the characters and the setting. So this is very important. And then after the exposition, there is the rising action. And in the rising action, we can see that the main character faces a series of conflicts. So something happened to the main character, the protagonist, and so he or she has to face a series of conflicts. And this is the rising action. And then we have what is known as the climax. And this is actually the most important or most exciting part of the story, because this is here we learn the outcome. So this part of the story is very, very important. It's also very exciting. And then there is what is known as the falling action, which also refers to the events leading to the end of the story. So once the climax is over, there is this falling action where the writer or the story has many events which gradually lead to the end of the story. And the final part of the story is the resolution, which is, as we can see, the end of the story. So once again, we have the exposition. Any plot of, the plot of any story is generally follows this kind of a structure. In the beginning is the exposition, where the characters and setting are introduced, and then there is the rising action, where the main character faces a series of conflicts, and the next part is the climax, which once again is the most exciting part of the story, and this is where we learn the outcome. And then the falling action, which refers to the events leading to the end of the story, and finally the resolution, which is the end of the story. Now, what I have for you in the next slide is actually the first part of the story, which can be considered, or which is the exposition. The exposition is the story, beginning of the story, where characters and setting are introduced. So let us quickly go through the first part of the story. These are the first two paragraphs of the story. A Wrong Man in Workers' Paradise by Rabindranath Tagore. The man had never believed in mere utility. Having had no useful work, he indulged in mad whims. He made little pieces of sculpture, men, women, and tassels, quaint earthen things dotted over with seashells. He painted. Thus, he wasted his time on all that was useless and unnecessary. People laughed at him. At times, he would want to shake off his whims, but they would keep clinging to his mind. Some boys never ply their books and yet pass their examinations. A similar thing happened to this man. He spent all his life in unnecessary work on the planet Earth, yet after his death, the gates of the heavens flung open for him. And so, it is within these two very brief paragraphs that Tagore, the writer, introduces the main character, and that is the artist, the man. The man who doesn't have any kind of useful work because he indulges in mad whims. And as we can see, whims means an unusual desire or unusual desires or impulses. And so he loves to make sculptures, he loves to paint, and he wastes his time on all that was useless and unnecessary. So we need to see whether Tagore really meant that this man was wasting his time on all that was useless and unnecessary, or is there something else that he wants to say? We shall see it. And so what happens is that people laughed at this man, and the man wanted to change because he promised himself that he would shake off, he would let go of all his whims and then do something useful with his life. But then he couldn't do it because he kept going back to whatever he loved doing, and that was making sculpture and painting beautiful things. And the narrator says that some boys never ply their books. That means that some boys never work hard at their studies and yet they pass their examinations. So taking this as an example, Tagore compares this example, or compares these students or boys who don't study but yet pass their exams to the man who never believed in mere utility. This man had spent all his life on doing unnecessary things on planet Earth, but then after his death, he was very lucky, very fortunate that the gates of the heavens were flung open for him. So this is the exposition, the introduction of the main character, the protagonist, and a little bit about his character, and then what happens to him. So the setting is Earth here, and then by the second paragraph, the setting moves to heaven. So that is all the time that we have today, students. What I want you to do is take a look at this plot diagram, go home today and read the story, let's come back tomorrow and let us discuss the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and resolution of the story. So I hope you enjoyed this class, students. So that is all for now. Take care. Bye-bye.